What's going on, everybody? It's your man, Louie T. Well, I feel like I can't hear myself. Hold on a second. Let me check some things out. Check. All right. I guess I'm good. I feel like the levels is low. Feels like the levels is good. 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 Feel like I can hear myself. Normally I can turn the juice up in the headphones. Hold on a second. Check. Check. I don't think that got nothing to do with it. All right. We just gonna get on with it. Tag deadline has come and gone. And I told you, believe half of what you see, none of what you hear, even if it's spat by me, your man Louie T. But I do be dropping some gems on y'all. And I told y'all, I said, I think this has the chance to be one of the fewest franchise tag used off seasons we've ever seen. And Adam Schefter just sent out a tweet that confirmed my hunch. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about what teams elected to do, what teams elected not to do, the ramifications for that, and so forth. We'll get to all of that and more here on the Louie T Network podcast that starts now. The Louie T Network is powered by MusicHead University. MusicHeads, classes in session. Turn me up. Enroll on YouTube now. Link is in the description. Who else could it be but me, your man, Louie T? Welcome to the 487th installment of the Louie T Network podcast. I, of course, am your set man, Louie T. Thank you for joining me. Hope this Tuesday afternoon is treating you well, and this week is going splendidly for you. NFL trade deadline or franchise tag deadline just expired at 4 p.m. on the East Coast. And so not a lot of fireworks with the deadline, and I figured that would be the case. I told you guys as much when this process first began that this didn't feel like a year where a lot of teams were going to be inclined to use the franchise tag. Now, what does that say? It says a number of things, and we'll discuss all of those things here in a second. Saquon Barkley got a well-deserved extension. I can't think of a single player in this league that deserved a pay raise more than Saquon Barkley, who signed a 2-year, $41.5 million extension or something to that effect. He was grossly underpaid for what he had been delivering for the Philadelphia Eagles. And again, what he's single-handedly doing, and I don't want to give him all the credit because Derrick Henry turned in an 1,800-yard rushing season last year, if I'm not mistaken. Josh Jacobs was phenomenal for the Packers. So those three in aggregate have changed the way teams view the running back position, or at least the impact that free agent ones can have. Now, again, last offseason, and I don't think in the moment when we were talking about last offseason's free agency crop, I don't think we in the moment truly appreciated just how good last season's free agent market actually was. I think we just kind of went about it as, oh, okay, this player's available, this player's available. Man, we can get this guy, you can get that guy. But taking a step back, and usually time is a great is a great way to put something in its proper perspective. Time is usually the best way for that to get done. And now stepping back a year later, looking at how those guys performed in free agency, and we knew the names last year. It's not like we didn't know that Jonathan Grenard was going to go out and have a great season. It's not like we didn't know Daniil Hunter was going to go out and have a great season. It's not like we didn't think Saquon Barkley couldn't go to Philadelphia and have the type of season he had. It's not like we didn't know Josh Jacobs was a dog of a running back. It's not like we didn't think Derrick Henry could do what he did in Baltimore. These were some prolific names that were available last year, and that's not common. Yet, last year when we were going through this process, we acted as if it was. So you look at this year's crop of free agents and you go, wow, it ain't really shit out here compared to last year. And I think that is the biggest reason why we're seeing teams not have to spend a franchise tag on players. It's not really shit out here. Not anybody worth having to pay the premium for to keep them under contract for at least one more season while you try to work out a long-term deal. There aren't enough guys that you're willing to sacrifice for so that no one else has the ability to sign them. You're willing to take the risk on a lot of these guys and say, hey, I mean, we want you back, but if you find greener pastures, best of luck to you. That's what the franchise tag essentially means is, hey, we can't afford to lose you. We can't. We can't even allow you to get to the open market because we're afraid of what could happen. Teams aren't afraid. If we lose you, sorry it had to be that way, but wish you nothing but the best. And then they move on and they go out and get a guy to replace you. So let's talk about that exact thing, the franchise tag, and what actually took place with the franchise tag this year as the deadline, as I mentioned, has come and gone. And we'll take that opportunity to do it here in the gem dropping session. You know what it is. Let me drop this gem on your melon. Open your mind, let your conscience be free. You're now rolling with your man, Louie T double E. Let me open you up. Get you thinking a little bit. But let me finish my thought, because, you know, sometimes I go on a tangent and I start to talk about something, I go off to something else, and I never finish my thought. I think I just did that. But Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs, and to a lesser degree, I don't really think he had as big of an impact as everyone thought he was going to, but I thought he was solid. He had some moments. Did DeAndre Swift in Chicago. Those guys really helped show teams that not only is the running back position alive and well, but you can sign a running back to a second contract. If he's been really good for you and he's still relatively young and you feel like the best is still yet to come, or he can at least continue playing at the level that he's given you the last couple of years, you're okay to sign a guy to an extension as a running back. There's this notion, and I get it, when you see the likes of a Ezekiel Elliott or Todd Gurley just flame out after they get that extension, I understand why teams are hesitant to give that second contract to a running back. Le'Veon Bell is another prime example of a guy that got that next contract, even though his was tumultuous and in a year that was wasted in there because of his own doing. It still didn't look good when he came back. Neither did it look good for Zeke Elliott or Todd Gurley, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, look at what the Browns ended up have happen with Nick Chubb, right? We get it. We understand the position, the nature of it, and how it works. That said, if you've got a special back, and it takes a special back for you to want to re-sign on a second contract as a running back. It takes a special one. Not everybody should be in that conversation. But if you have one that deserves to be paid, you should pay him, right? And these guys are an example of that. And they not only are an example of that, they're an example that you can win a Super Bowl by not having your quarterback be the best, the best player, right? Their best player was their running back. They got to the Super Bowl because of their run game and their defense, and their quarterback made timely plays. But that seemed to be an afterthought. That seemed to be something that escaped teams in the NFL since the mid-20 teens, right? I mean, the last team that won a Super Bowl with a mid quarterback, I mean, you probably got to go all the way back to the 2015 Denver Broncos when they beat the Panthers with a dominant defense and Peyton Manning at the helm. I mean, that offense was anemic by the time they got to the Super Bowl. I mean, since then, I think we've seen teams with elite quarterbacks win the Super Bowl pretty much every year, and the Nicholas Foles Super Bowl, obviously with the Eagles in 17, I guess. So generally speaking, you got to have one of them elite things at quarterback. And what Saquon was able to do, I think, shows teams, and that's why I think you're going to see some running backs go in the first round this year. I think there's a trickle-down effect. And we talk about this being a copycat league, and I think you're going to see that play itself out yet again this upcoming draft because of what Saquon Barkley was able to do and, you know, what Derrick Henry and those other guys were able to showcase as running backs. It's still a league, and everything's cyclical. We talk about this all the time because of how, you know, oh, it's not a running game. You know, it's not a rushing league anymore. It's a passing league, which it still is. And you got to be able to throw the football to be effective in this league. But if you have a dominant run game and you can still play elite level defense, you can still win big in this league. And that's what the Philadelphia Eagles proved last season. Now, it's not easy, and not everybody has the capabilities to do what they did. Everyone doesn't have the offensive line. Everybody didn't. Again, Saquon Barkley's don't grow on trees. And we can sit here and say what we want about Stray Jacket Hurts. Wow, I don't know why I was blanking on his name for a second. We say what we want about Stray Jacket, but when throws had to be made, he made them. All right, say what you want. But when throws had to be made, he made them, and he played well when they needed him to be at his best. He was at his best for the most part. So you still need a quarterback that's capable. You still need a quarterback that's capable. But anyway, let's talk about the franchise tag. Let's talk about what did and didn't happen. So let me read you a tweet. Let me start off this conversation by reading you a tweet from Adam Schefter. And this was from Adam Schefter 20 minutes ago. And I told you guys this, and I'm gonna elaborate on this after I'm done reading this. From Adam Schefter, quote, only 2 players, T. Higgins and Trey Smith, we'll talk about those 2 here in a second, were tagged this year. The fewest number of players tagged since 1994, when Eric Green and Henry Thomas were tagged, per EP Cap. There were 8 players given the franchise tag last year, and there have been at least 6 players tagged in each year going back to 2019. In the previous 5 years, the average number of players given the franchise tag was 9.2 per year. So 9 guys on average get the franchise tag every year. This year, only 2 guys got it. Now, we went through this maybe 2 weeks ago when I talked about the franchise tag. Close quote from Adam Schefter. We talked about the franchise tag and who we thought would get it. And I went through a list of every single player that I thought was eligible, you know, by looking at their performance, how they've been in the league, and what that team probably thought about them. And I said, these are the teams that may or may not use the franchise tag. And I went through this entire list, all 32 teams, and I said, I'm going to tell you guys, I don't foresee more than, I said at the time, I think 4 teams. I said 3 or 4 teams using the franchise tag. I said, that's unheard of. We don't see that in this league. Generally, it's 6, it's 7, you know, and as Adam Schefter just laid out for us, the average over the last 5 years was 9 guys getting the tag, which is roughly a quarter of the league, right? 2 guys got the franchise tag. That's it this year, 2. So that tells you that teams didn't feel compelled to use the franchise tag on any of their impending free agents, which tells you that the crop of free agents isn't very good. It's not very good when you look up and only 2 teams have decided to use their franchise tag. So that means that either teams feel comfortable that they can reach a long-term deal with the guys that are important, which we've seen teams do, and we'll talk about that here in a second, like Dallas, like the LA Rams, right, have reached deals with some of the players that would have necessitated a franchise tag being utilized. But then there are other teams that are very comfortable with the scenario of the player that they are interested in bringing back finding a new home and getting paid elsewhere, and they're okay with that. Again, which speaks to the lack of true elite talent in this year's crop of free agents. I went back and looked at last year's free agents a couple of days ago when I was looking at how many guys were available and how many impactful players changed teams last year. I just gave you 3 at the running back position. I've given you another 2 at edge rusher. Throw in an Andrew Van Ginkel, who was fan-effing-tastic for the Vikings this past year, as another one, and we could keep going. Free agency was absolutely loaded last season. It was loaded with guys who were impactful, who made a difference. Zach Bond, again, he wasn't a guy that you would have went into free agency last year saying, oh, we got to have Zach Bond, but he was a massive impact player for the Eagles. And if you're a Commanders fan, I don't need to tell you how impactful your free agent class was last year. You had 4 All-Pros, 3 of which were free agents a season ago, right? So free agency was ridiculous last year. That's not the case, and I think this is kind of setting the tone for what free agency is. The league is speaking, and you should, and very loudly, I may add, and you should be listening. I always tell you, listen when the league speaks. When there's one first-round quarterback and another one doesn't get drafted to the 4th round, the league is speaking. You should be listening. Or no other quarterback gets drafted to the 3rd round, the league is speaking. You should listen. When 6 quarterbacks go in the first 12 picks, the league is speaking. You should listen. And then another one doesn't go to the 5th, the league is talking. You should listen, right? They're telling you how they feel. The league is telling you this is not a great free agent class. So with that said, let's talk about the 2 teams that use the franchise tags and then some other teams that were close to using it that didn't, and the teams that didn't use the tag, which are the other 32 teams around the league, and what that means for impending free agents, right? So let's start with the Kansas City Chiefs. They were the first team to break the seal on the franchise tag this year. And I was actually not surprised because I knew it could either be Trey Smith or Nick Bolton that got it. As a matter of fact, I'm looking at my list that I compiled for you guys on the podcast episode that we did talking about the franchise tag a couple of weeks ago. And the Chiefs I had Nick Bolton or Trey Smith up here as guys that could get the franchise tag. So I wasn't shocked. I think we had already found out that they weren't going to use it on Nick Bolton. So that told me that it was probably going to be Trey Smith. If they couldn't reach a long-term deal with him, they did not. They put the franchise tag on him on an offensive line that struggled mightily in the Super Bowl. They couldn't afford to lose one of the best young offensive linemen that they have on that current unit. So they held on to him. They'll see if they can work out something long-term. If not, they've got Trey Smith under contract for at least 1 more year. On the other end, the Cincinnati Bengals used their franchise tag on T. Higgins. We knew that was going to happen. We were told prior to the window for the franchise tag being opened that they were going to, and I had told you this before that report had even come out. I had a buddy that lives in Ohio who's tapped into Cincinnati, was like, bro, they're going to franchise tag him. And we went through this conversation back and forth on the pros and cons. And when I was done having that conversation with him, I was convinced he was right. And I told you as much. Then a report came out 2 days later that they were going to slap the franchise tag on him. And everybody was like, well, you called it. And I was like, I told you. So them waiting as long as they did in the process before finally slapping the franchise tag on them, it's no surprise. They, I think they're dragging their feet with the, long-term deal, because every time we look up, T. Higgins is tweeting some, random emoji, normally a cap. Like, okay, guy, we get it. Your mom's on X, ranting and raving. You're posting cap. I get it. I think they're going to get a long-term deal done at some point, but we knew this was coming. Joe Burrow made it abundantly clear. And when your franchise quarterback, one of them ones, speaks and even says, I'm willing to give up some of my bread to make sure that this gets done, you do it. So T. Higgins is going to be back in Cincinnati, and I think it's going to be a long-term situation. I think they're going to get a long-term deal done here in the very near future. But there were other teams that mulled over the decision whether to use their franchise tag or not. Obviously, did not have to do it, and these teams didn't have to do it for various reasons. Either they signed the guy that they were planning on using the franchise tag on if they couldn't get a long-term deal done, but they got it done, so they didn't have to utilize it, or they're just going to roll the dice and hope it comes up nice. So let's talk about the first team that ultimately was able to avoid using the franchise tag due to getting a long-term deal done, and that's the Los Angeles Rams. Their left tackle, Alaric Jackson, who was very, very intriguing in free agency. Not only does he play a premium position, left tackle, not only is he young and talented, which is rare in today's market where you find a young left tackle hitting the free agent market going into his prime. He's not even at his prime yet, his peak of his superpowers. He's only 25 years old. So not only is he young, but there's a tremendous amount of upside at a premium position. You just don't see those type of guys hit the free agent market very often. And the Rams agreed, and they made sure that that didn't happen, reaching a long-term deal with Alaric Jackson, taking him off the market, which I figured they would do, either getting that done or slapping the franchise tag on him. You just can't afford to lose a guy of that caliber at that position. And I saw the deal, and I can't recollect off the top of my head what the deal looked like, but it wasn't a crazy deal either, right? Because of where he is in the pantheon of left tackles in the league, he's not going to get the top dollar. He's not going to be making Trent Williams type money. So that was another big part of the allure of going after Alaric Jackson should he have become available. The Rams were never going to allow that to happen. They reached a long-term deal, hence taking the franchise tag off the board for them. You move to the Dallas Cowboys, and this thing kind of materialized quickly. But if you know the Dallas Cowboys, like we know the Dallas Cowboys and how Jerry Jones operates, this is his move, waiting to the exact last moment. He did it with Dak Prescott. He did it with Ezekiel Elliott. He did it with CeeDee Lamb, and he did it again here. He's going to do the same exact thing with his edge rusher, Michael Parsons. We're going to sit here and guys are going to talk about him potentially getting traded and this and that. He's not going anywhere. They're not going to allow him to go anywhere. And just like they reached a deal with Osa Odigizua before the franchise tag deadline had to be met, they're going to do the exact same thing with Michael Parsons. They're going to go and bleed that thing down to the final hour like they always do, and then they're going to get a long-term deal done, which is really bad business, but you can't tell Jerry otherwise. So let him continue to do it the way that he's been doing it. So also Odigizua gets a 4-year deal. I want to say in the neighborhood of $75 million. I don't know the exact number, but at one point it felt like he was going to become a free agent. Like Dallas was finally getting their cap situation somewhat healthy, and they weren't in a position to just dump, $20 to $25 million on one guy. They just didn't feel like they were in that position, which is why the franchise tag felt like an impossible task for Dallas. Like, you just started freeing up cap space. Do you really want to dump all of it on this one guy? But he is an ascending player. Again, when you sign guys to contracts that look like the one that Osa Odigizua just commanded from Dallas, you want to ensure that this guy is trending in the right direction, that his best football is ahead of him, and you're getting in when the market is low, you're buying low, and you're going to get a return on your investment. Osa Odigizua turned in his best season as a pro last season with 6 sacks. He was constantly in the backfield, was very disruptive, one of the better defensive linemen that was under the radar in the league last season. And he's been steadily improving every year. So it led up to this. It was a crescendo that it met last year, his performance, that is. And the Cowboys rewarded him for it. And now they're hoping that he takes an even bigger step next year. And I'm as a fan of a team who paid a defensive tackle who had a career year, the year that he was looking to get paid, and then we never saw that from him again. I'm a little leery when I see guys have career years, but his is more in line with a guy that's just going to be solid and continue to be solid. It's not like he went from, no sacks, one sack to then six. He steadily improved 1 sack to 2 sacks to 4.5 to 6. So if that trajectory continues next year, it'll be 7.5, 8, 8.5, right? He's going in the right direction. So it's not like he jumped from, 4 sacks to 10.5, 11, right? Where you go, whoa, oh shit. And then you never see it again, right? Pop, 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 shots fired. But they felt like they needed to re-sign Osa Odigizua, and they did. And good for them. He's a good football player. He's a good football player. And one thing I can say about Dallas, they don't do it the conventional way. They don't do it the most efficient way. It's not smart the way they do things. I just saw that they restructured the deal of Dak Prescott I think it was CeeDee Lamb, to free up more cap space. This is why they find themselves in these positions, because they don't keep cash to cap. They always have to restructure and move money around because they wait so late to do these deals. But in saying that, they do take care of their players for the most part. You look at the Cowboys and all the guys that they've drafted, and obviously they got to let some of these guys walk. You can't re-sign everybody, but the main ones, the ones that are of elite quality, generally they hold on to their stuff, and they did it again here. So those were the two teams that signed players to long-term deals. And we found out yesterday that if the Cowboys could not get a long-term deal done with Osa Odigizua, they were going to slap the franchise tag on him. So they were able to avoid that, right? And so now the only other team that was really interested and very close to using a franchise tag was Minnesota on Sam Darnold, quarterback Sam Darnold, which I never believed that they were going to be willing to commit to Sam Darnold in that capacity, because I don't know what the franchise tag is for quarterbacks right now. I got to guess it's got to be around $40 million, right? That number's got to be extremely high. Are you really willing to commit to Sam Darnold for $40 million for 1 year? I mean, that'd be the stupidest investment I've ever heard of, right? I mean, yes, Sam played really well for you last year, but you drafted J.J. McCarthy. He should be healthy and ready to go by the time camp rolls around. And obviously setbacks can happen, and he could not play well, and you don't want to be in a position where the team suffers, because this was a team that was in the position for the number 1 seed down to the final week of the NFL regular season in the conference. And you don't want the team to suffer because of a young quarterback who may not be ready to lead them, but you're also not looking to invest in Sam Darnold. We saw what he did when the lights were their brightest and the stage was its biggest. We saw what he did. He got on the stage, he got stage fright, and he wet his pants. So what are we talking about here? At the end of the day, you let him test the market. You'd love to have him back, and you still may be able to get something done. And here's what I want to make sure that I make abundantly clear to everyone watching this is, just because you did not franchise tag a player doesn't mean you don't want that player back, and it doesn't mean that you can't get them back before the start of the new league year and they become officially a free agent. There's still a window here. It is March 4th. The tampering period does not begin until March 10th, which means other teams cannot approach a player's agent that is a pending free agent until Monday, March 10th. And the start of the new league year doesn't begin until March the 12th, which is a Wednesday. So we're still over a week from free agency and the start of the new league year kicking off. So even if they're talking to another team on the 10th and the 11th, they can't actually do anything. You still have time to lock your guy up before the 12th. So there's still time for the Buccaneers, and we'll talk about them here in a second with Chris Godwin, who I know they want back, although they didn't use the franchise tag on him, and we'll talk about that here in a second. There's still plenty of time for them to get a long-term deal done with Chris Godwin so that he doesn't hit the market where anything could happen and his market could explode, right? Same thing with Sam Darnold in Minnesota. Plenty of time for them, if they really want Sam Darnold back, plenty of time for them to get a deal done I always tell you deadline spur action, as we just saw with Dallas, right? Waited all the way up until that deadline that if they couldn't get the long-term deal done, they were going to franchise tag him. That deadline spurred action, got the long-term deal done, you move forward, right? So that's the next deadline for teams is March 12th. You want to get a deal done with a guy like Chris Godwin. You want to get a deal done if you're the Bears with a guy like Tevin Jenkins. You want to get a deal done with a guy like Javon Holland if you're the Miami Dolphins. You got till March 12th. I think most of those guys I just mentioned are going to be allowed to hit the free agent market, see what the market dictates. And a lot of times when you let your player hit free agency, he's not coming back. 9 times out of 10, not coming back, right? So let's talk about, let's quickly go through any players that could still get long-term deals done with their former teams or current teams that could soon become former teams. Amari Cooper is still in play for the Buffalo Bills. When you trade a draft pick for a guy in season, it doesn't necessarily work out for you the way you wanted it to, but it doesn't mean that they're giving up on Amari Cooper. I still think they would like to have him back. If the numbers can make sense for them, I can see them trying to get something done with him because they still need help at wide receiver, do the Bills. Miami with safety Javon Holland, I think they're going to let him test free agency. I don't see them striking a long-term deal with him prior to the start of free agency, but he's going to have a very robust market because there's not a lot of really good safeties available this year, not young and talented like Javon Holland. So I think you're going to see a really good, strong market for him. And he probably ends up being like a day one signee. And it won't be with Miami, more likely than not. The Patriots don't have a guy. The Jets have DJ Reed. I don't think he's going to be back. With that dysfunction, he wanted out at the trade deadline last year. So now that they brought in new management, new GM, new head coach, I don't think he's looking to stay there and be a part of another rebuild in New York. So he's out. I don't see them, having anybody that they're looking to take care of. Baltimore didn't use the franchise tag. I'm actually surprised that they didn't use it on Patrick McCarry, but they still have time, as I just mentioned. I think they're going to let Ronnie Stanley test free agency. He's going to move on, right? And I think they're going to be aggressive in the first round to take care of their free agent or take care of their left tackle position. They did it last year with Roger Rosengarten, and it worked out for them. I think they're going to try and do it again at left tackle this year. It's not a lot of left tackles that are ready to help you right away, so I think they're going to be aggressive in the draft. Should one fall to them, they'll take him. If one starts to fall a little in the draft, I wouldn't be shocked if they moved up to go get him. But I think they're going to re-sign Patrick McCarry and let Ronnie Stanley move on. But we'll see what happens there. Cincinnati already used the franchise tag on T. Higgins. Cleveland doesn't have anyone. Pittsburgh, they don't have a free agent, an unrestricted free agent. They do have a restricted free agent in Jaylen Warren. We talked about that already. They can slap a tender on him. He's not going anywhere. He's too valuable to what they're trying to do. They just need a lead back to complement. That sounds crazy. To complement Jaylen Warren. To me, he was their best back. And now you just need a lead guy, an Omarion Hampton, a Caleb Johnson, someone of that ilk to match, what it is they're trying to do offensively. And Warren is a piece of what they're doing offensively. So he's not going anywhere as a restricted free agent. Houston doesn't have anyone. Indy, I thought had two players actually in EJ Speed or Julian Blackmon. But I didn't think they would use the franchise tag on either one of those guys. They didn't, but I think they want both of those players back. Will they get those guys back? Don't know. If they let them hit free agency, chances are you don't get them back. Andre Cisco was interesting in Jacksonville. They opted not to, and we didn't think they were going to use it. I told you guys I didn't think they would use it on him, but doesn't mean they don't want him back in Jacksonville. Brandon Sheriff is another guy. Knew they weren't going to use it. He's 33 years old. Knew they weren't going to use the franchise tag on him. However, I think that's a guy they would also like to have back. We'll see what the market dictates for him. Tennessee, they had their punter, Ryan Stonehouse, and wide receiver, Nick Westbrook-Akine. I said they weren't going to use it on either one of those guys, but if they truly want them back, they have an opportunity to do so. But again, we'll see what happens. I don't think they're going to be aggressive on either one of them, although if I were them, and if they like Ryan Stonehouse, who led the league in punting a year ago, I believe it was, not this past season, but the season prior. You bring him back. But if they don't love him, you move on, right? Denver doesn't have a guy. The Chiefs already put the franchise tag on Trey Smith, and I think they still would love to have Nick Bolton back. But I'm going to tell you right now, you let Nick Bolton hit the free agent market, you're not going to get it back. He's a dog. So I know they want to have him back, and they're going to have to try and get something done within these next, 6 to 8 days, or else he's gone. Again, if he wants to leave. Sometimes guys hit the free agent market, they see what's out there, and then they realize I don't have it any better out there than I will where I am right now. Like, nobody else has Patrick Mahomes at quarterback. Nobody else has Steve Spagnuolo at defensive coordinator. Nobody has Chris Jones in front of them commanding double and triple teams, which allows me to roam free and run and make plays. Maybe I don't want to leave, right? If the money's close enough, he's won Super Bowls, and this is the thing that's dangerous with guys that have won Super Bowls. If you're not chasing a chip, then it becomes a money thing. Nick Bolton's a second-round pick. I need to get paid. He should be chasing the biggest bag that he could get his hands on, because this is probably going to be the one and only time he's going to hit free agency in this place with this type of power, with him being an ascending player. So this is going to be the biggest contract he's probably going to be able to command. So having already won multiple Super Bowls, it ain't about chasing a chip. It's about chasing a bag. Whoever's giving me the biggest bag, that's probably where I'm going to end up if I'm a guy like Nick Bolton. But we'll see. Some guys have different motivating factors. Trayvon Merrick in Vegas was a candidate, but I knew he wasn't going to get it. Robert Spillane, Devon Diablo, and Malcolm Kuntz are all guys that I think the Raiders are interested in bringing back. But again, you got a new regime out there. You got a new GM and a new head coach. And when that happens, all the guys that were there before they got there are free game, right? So those guys are going to be allowed to hit the market because they didn't bring those guys to Vegas. So they're going to get all their that's a team that's going to be turning over the roster like crazy this year. Anybody that's got a new GM this season is going to be turning their roster over like crazy. So the Jets are going to be turning that roster over. The Raiders are going to be turning that roster over, and it's going to look different, vastly different, right? The Chargers, J.K. Scott, J.K. Dobbins, or Christian Fulton were all guys that I thought the Chargers might want back, and they may, but J.K. Dobbins seems like a guy that's going to be allowed to hit the market. We'll see what happens with him, but I think the Chargers are one of those teams like the Steelers, potentially the Vikings, that will be looking to add a first-round running back in the upcoming 2025 NFL draft. So I can't see them bringing back J.K. Dobbins. So we'll see what happens. Christian Fulton, I thought, was actually really solid at corner for them. We'll see if they ultimately bring him back or not. Talked about Dallas already. They still have other guys that they would love to bring back. Rico Dowdle, Kevontae Turpin. He is a restricted free agent, much like Jalen Warren of the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Cowboys can put a tender on him. They're not going to let Kevontae Turpin leave. I can tell you right now, there are a lot of teams that would love to get their hands on Kevontae Turpin. And I can tell you this much, too. If there are teams out there that would utilize the hell out of a Kevontae Turpin way better than the Dallas Cowboys have at this point of his career. For some reason, they're allergic to using this man on offense. He'd be getting anywhere from 7 to 15 touches a game if he were on my team. Just off of the fact that this guy is so dynamic. He's going to get a few screens. He's going to get a couple of slants, something quick in his hands, and then he's going to get a jet sweep, maybe even a couple of carries out of the backfield, a toss, et cetera, et cetera. He's going to touch it at least 7 times every week. And there are weeks where he didn't touch it at all if it's not in a special teams capacity. But they're not letting him leave. They'd be stupid to let him leave. That's their hidden gem that they unearthed from I think at the time it was the USFL, wherever they got him from. And they're going to reap the benefits of that. So he's not going anywhere. Rico Dowdle had a great finish to the season. Wonder if he's back in Dallas, or do they go pursue in a deep running back draft class? Do they just say to hell with Rico Dowdle and go get an upgrade? More likely than not, that's probably what they'll do. The Giants don't have any guys, but Azeez Ojulari is interesting. He's going to hit the market. Somebody's going to pay him to be a situational pass rusher, and that'll be that. The Eagles, Zach Bond was interesting. I'm shocked that there's not a deal in place with him yet. The Eagles have always, and I've said this before, they've always been disrespectful to linebackers. Always. They've never valued, Howie Roseman does not value the linebacker position. That's proven. So I wouldn't be shocked if Zach Bond isn't back. But they're going to get something done. Again, they have 8 days, right, from now the 4th to the 12th to get a long-term deal done with Zach Bond. Now, Josh Sweat is going to hit the free agent market. Someone's going to overpay for him, I believe. Mekhi Becton is going to hit the market, and I think he's going to be gone too, right? They did what they need. Look, they have the best offensive line coach in football, okay? So they're not worried about Mekhi Becton leaving. They'll find another guy, plug him in, and he'll play like an all-pro next season. They're not worried about Mekhi Becton leaving, right? Milton Williams is different, but this is a deep defensive line draft class. So you can let Milton Williams test the free agent market if you so choose, and probably replace him with a really good player and be fine. They're already deep up front as is. And Kenneth Gainwell, you just let him leave. This is a deep running back draft class. Just go get you another one, right? So Zach Bond is the surprising one, though. Thought there was a chance he could be franchise tagged. Didn't think they would use it on him, but I do expect them to find a way to get a long-term deal done with the guy that was, you could argue, the MVP of their defense this year. Hard to imagine them letting him walk, but I've seen Howie Roseman be disrespectful to linebackers in the past, and it would not shock me if he did it again. I expect Zach Bond to be back in Philadelphia, though. Washington didn't have any guys, but they've got a ton of free agents. We talked about this already. Bobby Wagner, Jeremy Chin, Tress Way, Dante Fowler Jr., Zach Ertz, all guys that they should want back, that should want to be back in Washington. We'll see what happens. Again, when you let guys hit free agency, anything can happen. Money talks and all the other shit walks. Now, you got time to get these deals done, and we'll see if those things happen before the start of the new league year. Tevin Jenkins, Chicago, and Keenan Allen are two guys that I thought, Tevin Jenkins in particular, on a very porous offensive line. I thought Tevin Jenkins was a guy that, they may value, but I didn't think they would use a franchise tag on him. Keenan Allen was brought in on, some one and done type stuff in Chicago. They traded for him last year. I know that he wants to be back in Chicago. The question is, do they want him back? We'll see what happens there. Detroit didn't have any players, but Carlton Davis is a guy at the cornerback position, and I thought played well for them. He's going to be a highly sought after free agent, I believe, on that cornerback market. Green Bay didn't have anybody, but they do have center Josh Myers, who's really good, really young, going into the prime of his career, and has about 4 years of starting experience under his belt. So if a team out there needs a center, Josh Myers is probably the top of the top, the cream of the crop at the center position. If I'm Green Bay, I'm trying to find a way to get Josh Myers back. That's going to be a big blow to that offensive line if they can't. Minnesota, we talked about them. Sam Darnold, not going to be tagged. Byron Murphy was another guy that I thought they might think about using the franchise tag on. Cam Robinson was a guy they traded for in season. They don't need him as long as their franchise left tackle is mending well from his season-ending injury. So you don't need Cam Robinson. That was more of a in-season thing. Cameron Bynum and Aaron Jones are two guys that, they might have been interested in bringing back. More so Cameron Bynum than Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones was a stopgap at the running back position. I expect the Vikings to be aggressive at the running back position in the draft, whether that's first or second round, but I think they're going to be aggressive in attacking that position. Byron Murphy still remains a guy that I think they want back very badly. We'll see what happens there. Atlanta doesn't have anybody. Carolina doesn't have anybody, but I'm all over Michael Jackson. That was whack. I shouldn't have done that. I'm showing my age. I should not have done that. I'm a big Michael Jackson fan. Big Michael Jackson fan. Probably more so than most. I would love to see the Commanders go after Michael Jackson, more so than Mooney Ward, but we'll see what happens. To me, he's a Dan Quinn type of player. I really feel that way, but we'll see what happens there. New Orleans, they didn't have anybody for the franchise tag, but Paulson Adebo, Chase Young, and Jawan Johnson are all going to be guys I think that are highly sought after on the free agent market. If Adebo wasn't coming off of a femur injury, I think New Orleans would have probably been very intrigued on finding a way to keep him, even if they had to use the franchise tag. But they're going to let him test the market. Chase Young was a rental last year. He's going to go out and find a new place to be a rental at. And Jawan Johnson is a guy that I think is going to be one of the top tight ends available in this year's market. He's a really good young tight end. Um, Chris Godwin, I'm shocked that Tampa Bay didn't use the franchise tag on him. I thought they would if they didn't get a long-term deal done with him. But there's still time for them to get that long-term deal done. I don't think they want to play that game. If unless Chris Godwin has already said, I don't want to be anywhere else. I want to be in Tampa Bay. I wouldn't play that game. It's a lot of wide receiver needy teams out here that think they're a wide receiver or a player or two away from doing some serious damage. And even though he's coming off of a serious injury, ACL, if I'm not mistaken, teams don't give a shit. They know who Chris Godwin is, and his game is not predicated on speed. He's not Odell Beckham Jr. coming back from a knee injury, and you're not sure if he'll be explosive again. Chris Godwin's game is predicated on toughness, quickness, being able to get in and out of routes and breaks and win, or in the slot, and critical downs and distances. So I wouldn't let him get to free agency if I were the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, again, Chris Godwin may have already told his agent, I don't want to play anywhere else. Tampa Bay may already know this, and there's no urgency if that's the case. Like, this is home for me. This is all I know. This is where I want to be. And if that's been communicated to the team, cool. But again, you allow him to get to the free agent market, and a team like Buffalo's like, bro, I got all this money. I got plenty of money. I got plenty of money. And I'm not saying that Buffalo does have plenty of money, but Houston has plenty of money. And there are other teams out there that are looking at a Chris Godwin and saying, hey, bro, if you need it, I got it. All you got to do is say the word. So be careful, Tampa Bay. That's all I'm saying. Be careful. Don't drag your feet on this one. Levante David is another guy. He's a lifetime Buck. He shouldn't be going anywhere. Arizona doesn't have anybody. They're notoriously cheap, but Kaiser White was really good for them and has been over the last 2 years since they signed him. Remember, he was brought over there with their head coach, Jonathan Gannon, from Philadelphia, where Kaiser White was excellent. And he took his game to another level in Arizona. Again, I don't know if they're going to re-sign him or not. I think it'd be a mistake to let him leave, personally. Talked about Alaric Jackson with the Rams, and they got that done. They have other players that are interesting at the receiver position in particular. We'll see what they decide to do. But they got the main guy done, and they got Stafford, back in the fold as well. San Francisco, Dre Greenlaw is a guy that the defense just doesn't feel the same without him. But the injury concerns may be, big for them. It may be big for other teams that are looking at Dre Greenlaw and saying, I don't know if he's fully healthy. And with a guy like Nick Bolton out there, again, if I'm the 49ers, I may just go in a different direction, right? So they also have Aaron Banks and Talanoa Hufanga that are going to be free agents. Banks has been really steady for them. Hufanga has been really good when healthy, but he's also kind of a wild card. He's going to test the free agent market. We'll see what happens with both of those players. And in Seattle, I said this was a really interesting situation. They traded for Ernest Jones IV last year from the Rams. He was excellent for them. In that defense that they run with Mike McDonald, they have to have a signal caller in the middle of that defense. They have to have the brains of that operation. Ernest Jones IV was that for them last year. They don't franchise tag players in Seattle, and I talked about that on that episode of the podcast. So we knew they weren't going to do that. John Schneider has used the franchise tag twice in the 20 years he's been in Seattle, however long it's been. Feels like he's been there forever. And it was on a punter and I think a left tackle, right? No, it was on a punter and an edge rusher. Olindo Mari, I think it was, and Frank Clark, and they traded Frank Clark for to the Chiefs. So unless it's something like that where there's intent behind it, they're not using it, and they didn't. But I know they want Ernest Jones back, so that's a big one. We'll see what happens there, but it's going to be interesting with some of these teams. I think they're playing with fire if they want some of these guys back. But again, the names I just went through, these aren't guys that compel you to use the franchise tag, which takes me back to the original point that I made 2 weeks ago, and Adam Schefter and the teams in the NFL spoke and made it abundantly clear. We just don't see the value in using the franchise tag this year. Not enough good players, elite players. The franchise tag is for elite players, not for good players. This is what I talk about with the Hall of Fame. And I can be somewhat of a I fancy myself and I pride myself on being a guardian of sorts of the Hall of Fame, right? And it's not the Hall of Good, it's the Hall of Fame. That's why I don't think a guy like Eli Manning deserves to be in there. He won 2 Super Bowls, and that's what's going to get him in. I understand. But it's the Hall of Fame, not the Hall of Good. And the franchise tag isn't for good players, it's for elite players. Guys that are ascending, guys that play premium positions, guys that you can't move forward without. The league has spoken, and there are not very many of those guys on these NFL teams that are on expiring contracts. Let's move on to our next segment, and that's social media maneuvers. I'm a midday marauder. Y'all know what it is. If you're out there, you want your comment read on the air, use the hashtag LouieTLive to have your comment read. If it is pertinent and time permits, we'll get to your comment and react to it on the air. However, if you want to ensure that your comment is read, super chats are the way to get that done. Not only does that allow your comment to be put on the screen so everyone can see, but it also ensures that your comment is read, reacted to, and you jump straight to the front of the line. So your comment is definitely going to be reacted to. With that said, let's get to the comment section. And we start with JLG. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. My guy JLG writes, I had a nightmare that the Eagles signed Chase Young and he turned into a generational talent. JLG, wake up. Wake up, wake up, wake up. It's almost the 5th of the month. That's not happening. However, that is a nightmare. And on that defensive line, he could turn into a generational talent. But, I mean, he went to San Francisco, and they had dogs on that line when they were trying to make a push when they traded for him last year, and he did absolutely nothing. So, we know who Chase Young is. Like he's no generational talent. We know what he is at this point of his career. And look, he's a solid NFL player. He's no like bum. You know, here's the issue. He was drafted to be a generational talent. He was drafted number 2 overall to be a pseudo face of a franchise, and he did not live up to that. So from that perspective, he is a bust. But he's not the traditional bust where you go, oh, he can't play. He stinks. He should be out of the league. Chase Young's solid. He's a solid football player, but you don't draft a guy 2nd overall to be solid, right? So that would be a nightmare, though. Nightmare on Elm Street is what that would be. You know, nightmare on Pennsylvania Ave. That's we don't want that, right? We don't want that. So, hopefully nothing of the sort takes place. See if there are any comments here addressed for me. If not, we'll keep it pushing. Let's see. Kevin the PRF writes, who's your pick for the first free agent in the tampering period to announce to join a new team? That's a good one. So, the crazy part about this year is there aren't any like, oh my God, I can't believe that guy's a free agent type players. Like normally every year there's one guy that kind of heads the class of free agents, and he's gonna set the tone. That guy doesn't exist this year, but I will say it doesn't really matter what the situation is. If you've got quarterbacks involved, they're usually among the first to get snatched up because teams don't like to play with that position. And we get it. We understand. So I still think it's going to be Sam Darnold when it's all said and done. He's still one of the bigger free agent fishes of this class, even though it's not one that a lot of us are particularly fond of. There's still a number of quarterback needy teams that need a signal caller, and um, there's still a number of quarterbacks out there that have to find homes. We talked about that on the podcast a couple of days ago. So I think you're going to see the quarterbacks go quickly. Um, the cornerback market is a hot one, I think, this year because there's not a lot of them that are elite. The receiver market is interesting, but it's enough quality veteran receivers that I don't think you have to move as quickly as you normally would. So I think it's going to be the positions where you're looking and you're saying it's a premium position and there's not a lot of them. Like had Alaric Jackson been available, he would have been the first guy off. So Ronnie Stanley, right? Cam Robinson, those guys are in play to be the first guys that we hear getting deals. Like those are premium positions. Teams always need left tackles. So I expect those two, Sam Darnold. I don't think you're going to see the receivers move as fast. So the tackles, Cam Robinson, Ronnie Stanley, Sam Darnold, or one of the premium corners, Mooney Ward, Cam, Carlton Davis, one of those type guys. Paulson Adebo, even though I think teams are going to wait on him, he'll be kind of in that secondary cornerback market. Those early tampering names are going to be, and there'll be some low-level guys in there too, right? Teams want to, hey, let me just go ahead and get mine real quick. Let me reach in there and grab one, right? Like, I wouldn't be shocked if De'Ami Brown goes quick, right? You hear that the New England Patriots and De'Ami Brown agreed to a 3-year, $21 million contract. I wouldn't be shocked if that happens, and it's very quick. Remember, last year, Antonio Gibson was gone on the first day. He was one of the first guys to be announced to sign with the Patriots. He's like, whoa, wait. All right, Antonio Gibson? Give me? AG? It was like, yeah, we like that kid. I was like, oh, okay, cool. Right? So don't be shocked if you see some guys like that come off quick too, but it's going to be some of those big names. It's going to be Cam Robinson. It's going to be Ronnie Stanley. It's going to be Sam Darnold. It's going to be Charvarius Ward, one of those type guys for sure. Let's see. Kevin the PRF, right? What would your move be if the Commanders let Wagner walk and he heisted Bond? So I don't know if Zach Bond is gonna like. He might be one of those dudes that just plays well in that particular scheme. Like you always are very mindful and you have to be careful of guys who haven't done that before. And granted, that was his first time playing off the ball linebacker. You know, he's normally been a guy that's been sort of a pseudo edge rusher, stand up defensive end type guy, outside backer if he's off the ball, never, inside. So he might have just found his calling and this might be who he is, but I'm not going to lie to you. I would be hesitant. I wouldn't be thrilled at us doing that. I wouldn't be mad at it at all. Because again, I trust those guys and whatever they decide, I'm going to ride with it. Even if I don't love it, I'm going to ride. But if Bond ended up in Washington, you would hope that he would continue to do what he did. But you can't be assured of that. That's the part that makes you, because if it would be, you're laughing now, but then what if he came to Washington and he ended up being Jeremiah Trotter part 2 for us? Then the joke's on us, right? So I don't see them doing that though. They love Bobby Wagner, but it would be interesting if that happened. That would be us playing chess, I guess. Jonathan Hart, right? So would you kick the tires on Nick Chubb? No, not us. But a team like Dallas, I've seen them kind of floating that idea around. There are other teams where kicking the tires on a Nick Chubb makes perfectly good sense. Again, this is the worst year for Nick Chubb to be out here looking for work. Now, his job is to just get as healthy as he can to show teams, hey, I know that there's a lot of young backs coming to the league, but I'm still him. And if you give me an opportunity, I can prove it to you. But with this young infusion of talent at the running back position coming into the league, and that running back position being no country for old men, and Nick Chubb is older than his age suggests because of all of the knee injuries that he's endured, going all the way back to his collegiate days. There's no reason to take a risk on a guy like that until after the draft, right? Nick Chubb doesn't make sense prior to the draft to me. You know, he's a guy you let sit idle, and then everybody's not going to get a running back, right? We talk about this every year when we have deep positions. Everybody assumes they're going to get one. And then you get into the draft and shit happens and you don't get one. That's when Nick Chubb's sitting right there and you go, you know what? That's a low cost, low risk, high reward proposition. Let's kick the tires on Nick Chubb. We don't have to do that, though. Our biggest thing is getting faster as a football team. Nick Chubb is not going to do that for you. So we need speed. So no, that wouldn't be a good job. That wouldn't be a good acquisition for us. Troy writes, how would you feel if we drafted running back at 29, preferably Omarion Hampton out of UNC? I wouldn't mind if that's the direction they wanted to go in. If that's what they saw fit to do, sign me up. I told you, you're not going to get me to feel some type of way about the decisions that they're making because I trust this group wholeheartedly. Obviously, I will have an opinion based off of what's on the board. And if I see other players available on the board and I feel like there were other options I would have gone with, I'll tell you. But I'm not going to be upset like I was when Daron Payne was selected. You know what I mean? I'm not at 13 overall when I felt like there were other players that I thought could be impactful. I'm not going to do one of those again because I trust this group. All right. So that was the last comment. That was directed at me. So now we're going to transition to our final topic of the day. And that is garbage time. So I was having a conversation with my buddy about the quarterbacks and what is ultimately going to happen. He's a Raiders fan. So he hit me up yesterday. I said, man, damn, you're down bad, bro. I said, I almost want to feel bad for you, but I don't. But I almost do because of how down bad you are. This man called me yesterday and he said, hey, man, what's his name? I done forgot his dang old name. I'm about to tell you his name right now. His name is Joe Milton. Joe Milton. So he calls me up yesterday and he goes, hey, man, what you think about us trading for Joe Milton? I said, Joe Milton the third? Patriots quarterback Joe Milton? He's like, yeah. I said, I started laughing. I said, you're one pathetic loser. No offense. And of course, he said, none taken. He said, man, I went back and I watched his combine from last year. I watched his highlights from last year. I watched that week 18 game he played against the Bills. I'm like, man, you down bad, bro. man, I said, boy, I remember when that used to be me, man. Damn. He's like, man, I don't really want none of these quarterbacks out here, man. In free agency. I was like, damn, man. I remember when I said it sucks. It sucks. I remember when you had to try to get yourself excited about Taylor Heineke, or you had to try to get excited about Carson Wentz, so you had to try to get excited about Ryan Fitzpatrick. I remember. Hell, I was super excited about Sam Howell. You guys know how I felt about him. So I've been there. I know what it's like. But it's even worse when it's a journeyman veteran quarterback where you know, bro, like he had Gardner Minshew last year. Like, you ain't winning shit with Gardner Minshew. You know what I mean? And if they go out here and sign one of these quarterbacks that's available in free agency, you're not moving the needle. Joe Milton, you know, to him was like a guy that could move the needle. And I'm a big proponent of taking swings at the quarterback position. And I think if you're the Raiders, because like you don't have to trade for Joe Milton right now. Like, obviously, if you want Joe Milton, it's not going to take a lot to get him. I don't think the Patriots are trying to hoard him, right? I mean, honestly, that's the best case scenario. Because I'm pretty sure they believe in Drake May. And they drafted Joe Milton sort of for this exact reason, to showcase him a bit, just like the Patriots used to do when Belichick was there. They would always draft a guy, even though they had Brady. They drafted Jimmy Garoppolo. They would draft a Matt Castle. They would draft, may he rest in peace, oh, shucks, what's the big quarterback? Ryan Mallett, right? May he rest in peace. And they would always show you these dudes in some blowout victories or in the preseason, get you excited, and then they would pull the wool over your eyes. And the Patriots are still in that business, even though Belichick isn't there anymore. And that's smart business, by the way. They drafted Joe Milton in the 7th round, I believe. No better than a 5th round pick, but I think Joe Milton was a 7th round pick. I could be wrong about that, but it's 5th, 6th, or 7th, one of the three. Late round pick, and then you turn around and you flip it for something. Especially if it's a 7 and you get a 5th out of it. Great. Mission accomplished, right? It pales in comparison to them getting a 2 for Jimmy Garoppolo. I think they got a 2 for Ryan Mallett, and I'm not sure what they got for Matt Castle, but I know they got some pretty good trade compensation for him. But Joe Milton, if everything goes the way that it's supposed to go, he should never see the field in New England, ever. Not in a meaningful capacity. So if you can flip him a year after drafting him for a 5th round pick, I say you did well, right? But if you're the Raiders, you don't have to do that till after the 1st round is commenced, because you want to make sure that somehow, some way, and stranger things have happened, one of these quarterbacks don't fall into your lap. You just got to make sure that the Titans and the Browns don't lose their minds at the top of the draft. And then the Giants, let's see what happens in free agency with them, because they're in no position right now to draft a rookie quarterback. None. Because they won't be there to see the fruits of their labor if they draft a young quarterback. They'll be fired. And then now the next group will have to come in and figure out if that guy's the right fit for what they're trying to do. So they'd be better off just drafting, the best talent available at their pick. Would be, the Giants in particular. You could probably say the same thing for the Titans, because I don't know how much longer Brian Callahan's going to get. He stinks it up again this year. They might fire him. They just got a new GM. That's the only thing that I'll say is a little different. That GM would be picking a quarterback. So whomever he brought in as a coach would have to sign off on that quarterback, or else I'm not going to make you my head coach, because that's my guy. I drafted this quarterback. But I say that to say this. I brought that up because, man, it's tough out here on these streets if you don't have no quarterback, man. And it's going to be interesting to see where these guys end up. and what kind of an impact they can have. Sam Darnold was an afterthought last year. An afterthought. Nobody gave a shit he went to Minnesota. And he was the projected starter, but I can tell you this. After watching that first preseason game, you can ask any Vikings fan. After watching J.J. McCarthy in that first preseason game versus the Vegas Raiders, nobody thought Sam Darnold was going to make it to opening day as the starter. Nobody. I damn sure didn't. Not after watching that performance. Oh, shit. J.J. about to take that bitch. Sam Darnold was an afterthought, and he turned out to be one of the best free agent acquisitions. Obviously, the running backs that we talked about were tremendous, and some of those defensive players but from a quarterback perspective, he was the best acquisition last year. It wasn't Russell Wilson. It wasn't Justin Fields. It wasn't any of the guys that switched teams at the quarterback position last offseason. Sam Darnold. Could there be another guy in the mix this year that we're not thinking about that's an afterthought that could go to a team and change the fortunes of that team overnight? Highly doubt it. Highly doubt it. Keep in mind, Darnold had a great team around him too. Defensively, they were one of the best in football. So there was also some other factors, but their run game was solid. It wasn't great around him. I'm rooting for Justin Fields. And, one of the conversations me and my buddy had was, if the Steelers don't keep Russell Wilson, because the word out on the street, and I could be wrong, word out on the street is they're leaning towards keeping Fields over Russell Wilson. Don't know how true that is. We'll see what they decide to do. They've got to make a decision here shortly, though. But if they decide to keep Justin Fields, who the hell wants Russell Wilson? I'm like extremely fascinated with that, because he asked me the $1 million question yesterday that we've had this discussion on this program multiple times, because me and him had a deep Hall of Fame conversation yesterday. Me and him had a deep Hall of Fame conversation yesterday. And I was adamant that Russell Wilson was a Hall of Fame quarterback, but man, this end to his career has not been good. It's not been good. And so I don't know, man. He's trending in the wrong direction. And then there's been this conversation around Aaron Rodgers. He just purchased a home in Nashville, and so that got a lot of attention. And I'm like, there's no way Aaron Rodgers would play for the Tennessee Titans. It's no way. Is that what we've been reduced to? We playing for the love of the game now? That's what we're doing? For the love of the game? I mean, if that's what you're doing, that's cool. But at this point of his career and who he is, it ain't no love of the game shit going on here. Either you playing because you think you can win a chip, or you just hang the shit up. It's going to be really interesting to see how all of these quarterback dominoes kind of turn out. It's going to be interesting to see. But I digress. That's going to do it for me. Your man, Louie T, here on the 487th installment of the Louie T Network podcast. I look forward to joining you guys on Thursday, which will be the next episode of the podcast. The goal is to go Thursday and Friday, right? We'll see if that happens or not. Should be Commanders Kings tonight. Should be. We'll see if that takes place. And then we'll go from there. Right? More likely than not, you're going to see my face tomorrow, Thursday, Friday. You can't get rid of me. You're stuck with me. So I'll be around. Anyway, I appreciate y'all for joining the kid here on the Louie T Network podcast. 487th installment, getting close to 500, the big 500. Wow. Anyway, you guys enjoy the rest of your Tuesday. We'll circle back and talk about more happenings around the National Football League as we get closer and closer to the start of the new league year. Shit's getting really interesting. You're seeing a lot of teams cut bait with players, free up that cap space that I've been talking about. More cuts to come and more deals to come as teams start to reach deals with some of these impending free agents. So we'll keep tabs on all of it. But until then, I'm your man, Louie T, signing off. You guys have a good one. Take care. See you next time.